Howdy friends, rivals and people who genuinely want to learn English. My name is Nishka and today we're going to be focusing on one of CAT 1991's passages, specifically the section 3rd passage number 1. So I'm going to be making videos on CAT more often now because I feel like it has good potential, and the smaller questions, the MCQs ones, are going to be going on my shorts, whereas the passages, there are 6 passages to be clear, they are going to be going on to longer videos. Okay, so before we read the entire passage, it is always advisable to just skim through the questions. So I'm going to be reading the questions out loud, not going to be explaining the answers or what the words mean. I'm just going to be reading the questions and then we're going to read the passage. If you're giving any exams, any papers, it is always advisable to read the questions before the passage, because you might read the entire passage and then when it comes to the answers you forget what you have just read. I mean, it happens to people. So let's start with the questions first. The first question is, the traditional kinship group provides. So from this we got an idea of we're going to be talking about kinship groups. Now what is kinship? That I'm going to be explaining when we get to the passage. Which of the following is an indicative of the extent of disintegration of kinship groups? Which of the following statements is not true? Well, let's not focus on that because I'm not telling the answers right now. According to the author, what has been sacrificed with the rise in an individual's self-consciousness? The theme of the passage is which of the following? Again, not focusing on that. What does the author mean by serial monogamy? Which of the following statements cannot be inferred? I explained that word inferred in one of my shorts. Which of the following statements cannot be inferred from the above passage? The word genealogy refers to. According to the passage, the most distressing trend is. According to the passage, which statement is not true of the kinship group fragmentations? Again, we cannot focus on that question. So we have just skimmed through the questions. We now know that we're talking about kinship groups. So let's start with reading the passage. I have my laptop here and we're going to start reading the passage. The first line is, humans have probably always been surrounded by their kin, those two they have been related by blood or marriage. So the first line that the author is suggesting is, humans have probably always been surrounded by their families. Yes, kin means families. Families, basically the people who they're blood related or the people who they're married. The next line is, but the size, the composition and the function of their families and kinship groups have varied tremendously. So if there are 100 kinship groups, then the author is suggesting that all of these kinship groups are different than each other. The size of these families, what they do, everything is different than another one. People have lived not only in the nuclear family made up of just the parents and offspring, which is standard in the West and has been found almost everywhere. They have lived in extended families and in formal clans. They have been unvocalucal, they have been untolerable, they have been conscious of themselves as heirs of lineages hundreds of generations deep. So the author is explaining that people have not lived in the general nuclear family in which there are the parents and the offspring. Offspring is basically the child, and this is the standard way of living in the West, and it has been found almost everywhere. Instead, people have been living in extended families. Their grandparents, in fact their great grandparents, they have been living in extended families and in formal clans. Okay, now over here it has stated formal clans. Now formal does have a lot of meanings, but I'm going to be guessing that here formal means in the past. So if I was a doctor, so I could say that I was formerly a doctor. So they have been avunculocal, they have been uncorrelatal, they have been conscious of themselves as heirs of lineages hundreds of generations deep. Now, here are three words: avunculocal, uncorrelatal, heirs, and lineages. Now, avunculocal basically means to live near your family's side. For example, my paternal grandmother, my paternal grandfather, my father's sister, my father's brother. If I live near them, then basically I'm living avunculocal. Ultralateral basically means to make a decision or an action that is, somehow related to a town, a city, a state, anywhere, without getting the opinion of others. So that is what an ultralateral means. Next, they have been conscious of themselves as heirs of lineages hundreds of generations deep. So basically, this is, the author is suggesting in this line that the people knew that they were heirs. Okay, so the heir is somebody who was legally entitled to somebody's property after that person's death. And lineage basically means my ancestors' property or the things that he or they have given to me. So they knew what they were heirs of. The next line is, however constructed, the traditional kinship group has usually provided those who live in it with security, identity, and indeed with their entire scheme of activities and beliefs. So the traditional kinship basically provides an individual security, identity, and beliefs and activities to, believe in. For example, if a person doesn't have a kin around them, they're going to be confused, they're not going to be protected. Whereas if I have a kin around me, if I have my family around me, I'm going to be protected, I'm going to know what to believe in, I'm going to have an identity. The nameless billions of hunter-gatherers who have lived and died over the past several million years have been embedded in kinship groups. And when people started to farm about 10,000 years ago, the universe remained centered on kinship. So embedded basically means to be firmly placed, and so this line is suggesting that the billions of hunter-gatherers have been embedded, placed firmly in kinship groups. So they didn't really move their kinships. Now, when people started to farm, again 10,000 years ago, so people believed that everything was around kinships. The universe was remained centered on kinships. Now that there was a durable form of wealth which could be hoarded gain, some families became more powerful than the other. Society became stratified, and genealogy became an important means of justifying and perpetuating status. So hoarded grain basically means accumulated treasure. Accumulated means stored in one place. Now, after farming was invented, people started to differentiate between kinship groups. If that person had more hoarded grain, basically stored grain, then they were going to be more rich. If this group of kinship groups did not, then they're going to be poor. Now, the society was stratified, meaning that it was divided into layers: lower class, middle class, upper class. Let's talk about genealogy. Genealogy basically means the study of family's history. So if I go and check who my ancestors are, what they did and things like that, then I'm basically going into my family's genealogy. Okay guys, so that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'm going to be reminding you guys again, I have started a new Instagram channel, so I will link that down in the comment section, as well as another video that you should check out, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye. During the past few centuries, however, so fragmentation basically means, and kinships have been, so people or kinships have been starting to going into kinships